Hey guys, it's the Computer Tutor here. This is my first video. Today I'm going to show you how to pan and zoom around a sketch in processing. We're going to do this using the scale and translate functions that are already built into processing, and we're going to control these functions using a set of variables that we make. I've already set up a little sketch right here with a couple of shapes scattered around the screen, and we're going to pan and zoom around these shapes. So we're going to go ahead and start with float scale equals 0. This variable is going to control how zoomed in we are, followed by xpan equals 0 and ypan equals 0. As you can probably guess, xpan determines how far panned we are on the left, to the left and right, and ypan controls how panned we are on the up and down axis. And so what we're going to start out doing is we're going to say translate width divided by 2 and height divided by 2. What this is going to do is, when we implement the scale function, which will zoom us in and out, it'll zoom towards the center of the screen rather than the upper left corner of the screen, which it usually does. Now we're going to say scale, because scale is our zoom level variable, and then we're going to do another translate, which translates by our xpan and our ypan. And that's pretty simple. That's all there is to it, really. Soon we're going to implement some controls. So if we run the sketch, what I've done is scale actually needs to be 1 because that's the default zoom level. A scale of 0 would technically be infinitely zoomed out. So if we set the scale to 1, we can see that the sketch is actually focused. The center of this sketch is actually where the corner of the previous sketch would be. So this right here where my mouse is actually the top left corner, and the rest of the sketch is down there. So what we need to do is set xpan and ypan to the midpoint of our screen, which in my case is 720 and 450, which you can see by taking these values down here. And now if we present the sketch, what you're going to see is we've actually gone even farther off in the wrong direction. So what we need to do is, in this translate function, set it to translate negative xpan and negative ypan. And now we're going to be properly positioned. There we go. And so now we can actually control our zoom level using the scale variable. So if we set a scale of, say, 1.5, then we'll be zoomed in to the sketch. There we go. So now we're sort of zoomed in. Now what we can do is we need to set a couple of variables that'll control when we're zooming in, zooming out, zooming left, and zooming right and such, so that we can add controls to this. So we're going to start out with a boolean zoom in equals false, and a boolean zoom out equals false. And basically when zoom in is true, we're going to be zooming in, and when zoom out is true, we're going to be zooming out. And I'm going to do this for up, down, left, and right now. Alright, so I've set up all my booleans with my up, down, left, and right. And now what we're going to do is we're going to make it so that these booleans control when we're zooming and panning. So I'm going to say if zoom in. So this will execute this code when zoom in is true. Let's say scale times equals, let's say 1.01. And if we set zoom in to true and we run the sketch, it's going to zoom in steadily towards the center of the screen. There we go, it's working as we intended. Set it back to false. And I'm going to say if zoom out, we say scale gets divided by 1.01. And the reason I'm using multiplication and division instead of addition and subtraction here, as you saw earlier, when scale gets to 0, it's impossible for it to render because it's infinitely zoomed out, so we need to use a multiplication and division instead. And I'm going to do this with the up, down, left, and right. Alright, so I've set up all of the if statements. Notice that I'm not using else if statements because we want them to actually be able to do multiple things at one time. So we want them to be able to pan and zoom at the same time. So we're not using else if structures. And so now that we've got this set up with the booleans, we want to be able to control these booleans using some sort of input like the mouse or the keyboard. So for this I'm going to use the keyboard, and we're gonna allow the person to control zoom with up and down arrow keys and pan with WASD. So I'm gonna say void key pressed. So this function is called whenever a key is pressed. And I'm gonna say if key code equals up, then zoom in equals true, and if key code equals down, or actually we're going to use an if statement, not an else if statement, we say zoom out equals true. And for this we're going to say zoom in equals true and zoom out equals false, so that when one goes on the other one turns off. And I'm going to do this for all the panning too. Alright, I've set up the if statements for the WASD keys and adjusting these Boolean variables for pan left, pan right, pan up, and pan down. So now if I run the sketch, when I press these keys, it'll do the performed action. So if I were to press A, I'm going to pan to the left, to the right actually. So in these if statements up here, I actually need to change the Y pan and X pan values around so that they pan to the right direction. There we go. So now if I press the A key, it'll pan to the left, but the problem is it'll just keep panning to the left, and when I release the A key, it'll not stop, and if I press the W key, it'll go up. So now we're going to do essentially the same thing, but with void key released. That gets called when a key is released. So in this, I'm going to say if key code equals up, then you should stop zooming in. So I'm going to say zoom in equals false. And if key code equals down, zoom out equals false. I'm going to continue this for the pan values, similarly to how I did it in the key pressed function. Alright, so I've completed these if statements to take into account the pan functions, and so now the action will stop when I release a key. So if I run the sketch, I now have control of all my zooming and panning. But the problem is, this is really slow and really cumbersome. So now we want to set some pan speed and zoom speed values. So I'm going to say float pan speed equals, let's set it to 5 because it's at 1 right now. And then float zoom speed, let's set it to 1.01, which is what it is right now, but now let's change it to 1.04. And now we switch out these values for our new variables. And now when we present the sketch, since our variables are increased, it'll be a little bit faster. So now I can zoom in and out and pan as I please. And you can adjust this control scheme to use mouse input and whatever input you want, just by adjusting these booleans and the pan speed and zoom speed and such. And that's about it. So guys, if you like this video or you want to see more of it, go ahead and hit the like button and the subscribe button. And if you have any video suggestions or tips, be sure to leave them in the comments below.